morning, viewers. Today we have stories from across the country, and later, the weather. But first, we have a very important announcement and a special guest to help us explain the news. Hans Krebs. Hello, how are you this morning?
Very good, thank you.
So I understand that yesterday an extremely important breakthrough in science was released.
Yes, well, yesterday my colleagues and I published our research and discovery of what we call the citric acid cycle, or Krebs cycle.
So what does this cycle do, and where does it occur?
Well, the citric acid cycle is a process in cellular respiration. Cellular respiration is a process that occurs in our bodies that breaks down glucose into usable energy called ATP. We discovered that the Krebs cycle occurs after oxidation of pyruvate.
Wow, that's so interesting. Could you tell us some more about this Krebs cycle, as you call it?
Of course, as I said earlier, the Krebs cycle begins after oxidation of pyruvate in the inner membrane space of the mitochondria. Glycolysis is the splitting of glucose molecules into two molecules called pyruvate. Glycolysis takes in glucose and makes 2 pyruvate, 2 ATP, 2 NADH, which are transport molecules for electrons. After glycolysis comes oxidation of pyruvate. This produces 2 CO2 molecules, 2 NADH, and acetyl coenzyme A. This acetyl coenzyme A, we have discovered, enters a process called the Krebs cycle, named after me. This process creates NADH, FADH2, and CO2 for oxidative phosphorylation.
So what about oxidative phosphorylation? How does that work?
Oxidative phosphorylation is by far the most complicated process in all of cellular respiration. Oxidative phosphorylation starts with the electron transport chain. Electrons are dropped off by NADH and FADH2. NADH and FADH2 are oxidized into NADP+ and FAD in this process. Oxygen pulls the dropped off electrons through the chain. As these electrons move through, hydrogen is actively pumped from the matrix to the inner membrane space. These hydrogens in the inner membrane space desperately want to get back to the matrix. So they flow through ATP synthase in a process called chemiosmosis. 28 to 30 ATP are made from the pumping hydrogen through ATP synthase per glucose molecule. This gives our body energy to do everyday tasks.
Wow, these are some amazing discoveries you and your team have made. Congratulations, sir.
Thank you very much.
Alright, coming up next, meet the late ancestor of the man who discovered a mysterious process called photosynthesis. Stay tuned.
Welcome back, folks. Today we talk to Danita Juan, an ancestor of Juan Ingenhousz, the scientist credited with the discovery of photosynthesis. Good morning, Danita. How are you?
Very good today, thank you.
Good to hear. Now we would love to hear about your great-grandfather's discoveries.
Absolutely. Photosynthesis is a process that occurs in autotrophs. These are organisms that produce their own food. The most prime example of these are plants. Plants break down energy from the sun into food that keeps them alive. This is photosynthesis.
Fascinating.
Photosynthesis occurs in the plant's chloroplast, more specifically in the thylakoid membrane. In the thylakoid membrane, there are systems called photosystems. Light from the sun will hit these photosystems, and the light harvesting complex acts as an antenna and traps the energy from the light. Energy is then passed from chlorophyll B to chlorophyll B until it reaches chlorophyll A. Electrons in chlorophyll A get excited and jump up an energy level. The primary electron acceptor snatches the electrons and sends them to the electron transport chain.
Wow.
Sir, please?
Oh, sorry, my bad. Please continue.
Thank you. ATP is then made through chemiosmosis. There are 2 photosystems in the membrane. Electrons from photosystem 1 are sent to NADP+ and reduce it to NADPH. NADPH is the final electron acceptor. Electrons from photosystem 2 replace electrons from photosystem 1. Water helps to replace electrons for photosystem 1. That entire process is called light-dependent reactions. Light and H2O goes in, and O2 is produced. The ATP and NADPH that was produced will soon be used again.
So, Is there a second part to photosynthesis?
Yes, the next part of the process is called light-independent reactions, or dark reactions.
And how do... what was it? Dark reactions work.
Dark reactions occur through the Calvin cycle. The Calvin cycle takes in CO2, the ATP and NADPH produced in light reactions, and produces glucose that can be used by the plant for energy. The Calvin cycle uses an enzyme called ribisco and turns CO2 into G3P, which then becomes glucose.
Yes, very, very interesting. That's all the time we have for today. And we'll see you next time.